Like all good things, the history of No Doubt starts with a hot girl. And in this case, it was Gwen Stefani, one of the best representatives the itty bitty titty community ever had. If you only know Gwen as the lady from The Voice who had to sit next to Blake Shelton for a paycheck, buckle up, because Gwen in the 90s, untouchable. She was a baddie before being a baddie was even a thing. Girls wanted to be her and guys wanted to do her. Me too. Gwen Stefani proved that small boobs are just as cool as huge honkers, and boy is she right. Only the most based opinions are found here. Coming back to the band, Gwen and her brother first started getting into music when they were teens. In 1986, Gwen Stefani was working at Dairy Queen in Anaheim, California with her brother Eric. Like all older brothers back in the 80s, Eric was into weird bands, particularly ska bands. For those of you who don't know what ska is, imagine punk rock but with some trumpets thrown in there, and the guitar playing the same two notes that are a variation of mermaid, 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 mermaid. No? Oh, why can't I say it right, dude? Okay. Mermaid, mermaid. Believe me, it's a vibe. Source? Trust me, bro. Inspired by the early ska scene of the 1980s, Eric and Gwen started writing songs. Here they met up with John Spence and decided to start a ska band. Originally named Applecore, which, let's be honest, is a terrible name. No Doubt consisted of 9 members. That's so crazy to me. I forgot about that. Yeah, 9 members. With John and Gwen as its lead and backup vocalist, and Eric as the keyboardist. Inspired by Madness, The Specials, and The Selector, No Doubt would start off as a ska music band and start hitting the Orange County backyard party circuit, which is a fancy way of saying they performed for drunk teens who threw beer bottles at them. Fun fact, the first song that Eric and Gwen wrote together was called Stick It in the Hole, which, to my disappointment, is not about sticking the wee-wee in the cooch-cooch, and instead talks about sharpening a pencil. Narrowly avoided an Alabama situation here. No Doubt had their first live performance at an Orange High School backyard graduation party on June 6, 1987, with 2 other California ska bands. Like most underground bands whose early music sucked No Doubt got booed off stage. And like most underground bands, they did not care. They just shrugged that shit off. Now, despite getting bottles thrown at them, No Doubt would start to develop a following, and according to Gwen, it was because they had a hot girl with them. Sounds like my kind of band. Soon after their first show, Tony Canal, No Doubt's eventual bassist, would join the group. Tony was from England, and while he wasn't Henry Cavill by any means, he did have that British riz. By this point, No Doubt was starting to play regularly in LA and Anaheim, and would even play alongside bigger ska groups like The Untouchables, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Fishbone. Gwen's vocals and Spence's energy on stage made No Doubt a local favorite, and in December of '87, No Doubt was ready to make it big. They were booked to perform at the Roxy Theater in LA, and as an opener for The Untouchables. And this is where things would go very wrong. A week before No Doubt was scheduled to play, John Spence took his own life. Spence's death came as a shock to everyone in the group, and it was something that none of them saw coming. Spence had the most energy out of everyone, and was famous for yelling and doing backflips while singing. With their lead vocalist and best friend gone, No Doubt was stuck. They had the biggest show of their career lined up, and they didn't know what to do. No Doubt would eventually decide to play one last time in Spence's memory, with Gwen and Alin handling the vocals. They later decided to continue Spence's memory with 2 new members, Adrian Young on the drums and Tom Dumont as their guitarist. Alin Mead, No Doubt's co-vocalist, would decide to leave the band around this time after getting his girlfriend pregnant. Bro really pulled a real-life ejaculate and evacuate. With a new drummer and new guitarist in the band, No Doubt slowly began to shift away from their original strictly ska sound and started incorporating more punk rock into their music. With Mead now gone, Gwen would eventually become the lead vocalist as No Doubt began playing at the Whiskey. Despite having a huge local following, No Doubt still hadn't gotten any record deals. As most of us now know, record companies at the time were more focused on organizing freak-off parties than they were in getting actual good artists. No Doubt would eventually land a deal with Interscope Studios in '91 after one of their executives, Tony Ferguson, saw Gwen perform and realized he wanted Gwen so bad. Can't say I blame him. No Doubt released their self-titled album, No Doubt, because why not, in 1992, and it failed. Like, hard. We're talking Dwayne Johnson's rap career levels of failure. The album sold only around 30,000 copies and failed to get any radio shows to feature them. The band went on tour to promote their album, where they realized that outside of California, people didn't even know them. Eric's interest in the band started to drop off, and after Interscope tried to pair No Doubt with Matthew Wilder as a producer, Eric stopped showing up to rehearsals. He would finally quit in 1994 and go on to become an animator for The Simpsons. Yes, there is a good chance one of the creators of No Doubt drew Homer choking Bart. At this point, things could not be worse. No Doubt's first album had landed on its ass. Their lead lyricist just quit, and with Gwen now single, there was always a strange sexual tension in the tour van. Things weren't looking very cash money, and it was clear to everyone that Interscope wasn't in the mood to release any new albums. No matter what the group came up with, Interscope would say no, and eventually No Doubt was handed over to Trauma Records in 1993. Tired of waiting for funding and approval, No Doubt would self-release their second album, The Beacon Street Collection, in 1995, an album I didn't even know existed until researching for this video. This album featured a lot more rock and punk influences and differed quite a bit from their first album. Everyone in the group fully expected the Beacon Street Collection to tank, and they were ready to go back home. Technically, it wasn't even legal for them to self-release an album, since they were still under contract with Trauma Records. Much to everyone's surprise, however, this album sold 100,000 copies? What? Based on the sales of the new album and their improved sound, No Doubt was greenlighted for their third album, Tragic Kingdom, that same year, and was sent to tour alongside Bush. In my opinion, Tragic Kingdom is their best album. No contest. Their first album has some decent stuff, but if you want to get into No Doubt, start with Tragic Kingdom, or the singles. Their singles is a compilation of all their best songs, so you could also start there. Anyway, a few weeks before Tragic Kingdom's release, the album's first single, Just a Girl, was released. Just a Girl turned out to be No Doubt's big break. It was the song that made me fall in love with No Doubt, and if you're younger than 25, chances are the first time you've heard it was on TikTok, or playing on the speakers of some old rundown sandwich shop. Just a Girl ended up peaking at number 23 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart, and it solidified No Doubt's position in the music industry. No Doubt would release 2 more singles, Spiderwebs and Don't Speak, in the coming weeks, with Don't Speak topping the Billboard 100s chart for 16 weeks. Just a Girl showed fans just how good No Doubt could be, and Don't Speak proved it. Don't Speak topped the charts in the US, UK, Ireland, and even the land of maple syrup. I still remember playing Don't Speak when I broke up with my first boyfriend back in like 2nd grade, and it's still part of my iTunes playlist even now. Tragic Kingdom would eventually go on to be nominated for 2 Grammys in '97, and by '99 had been certified diamond and sold more than 16 million copies worldwide. Speaking of the Grammys, back in those days, no one got slapped at the Grammys for calling someone bald. I'm looking at you, Will Smith. The success of Tragic Kingdom made No Doubt look like a one-hit wonder, and they were determined to prove that wrong. In April of 2000, No Doubt released their 4th album, Return of Saturn, and the lead single, Ex-Girlfriend. Unlike their last album, which focused on Gwen and Channel. I don't know if it's Canal or Cannel. I'm gonna say Cannel because that sounds cooler. Return of Saturn talked more about Gwen's relationship with Bush vocalist Gavin Rossdale. The album debuted at number 2 at Billboard's Top 100 and was very well received. Commercially, yes, it didn't sell as many copies as Tragic Kingdom, but it was still a very good album to a lot of people. Just my opinion, but except for Ex-Girlfriend, I think Return of Saturn is a really crappy album. I hate it. Around this time, No Doubt started to deal with an identity crisis. Tragic Kingdom and Return of Saturn were both centered around Gwen, and the rest of the band were starting to look more like backup singers. Gwen was the protagonist and the other guys were NPCs. The media wasn't focusing on the rest of the band, and this started to create some resentment, even though it wasn't Gwen's fault. Now, I personally have no issue with beautiful women being the main character, but I get their point. Gwen was also featured on 2 of the biggest songs of the year after Return of Saturn. The first one being Moby's Southside, and the second was Eve's Let Me Blow Ya Mind. These features made Gwen arguably bigger than No Doubt, and soon there were rumors that No Doubt was about to break up. You guys need to understand that back in the early 2000s, Gwen Stefani was the it girl. She was setting fashion trends, headlining newspapers, and on the cover of every gossip magazine. She was also getting a ton of hate for, let's just say, some weird fashion choices. As for No Doubt, some fans were angry at how the band was slowly shifting to a more pop vibe, saying that the group was a sellout and no longer a ska band. They're not wrong, what can I say? There were lots of artists in this time period that had underground music, but then jumped on the pop bandwagon. Avril Lavigne, Black Eyed Peas, and Taylor Swift, just to name a few. You can recognize bands as sellouts, but still like them. They aren't mutually exclusive. But to prove the haters wrong, No Doubt announced Rocksteady, their 2001 studio album. Recorded in Jamaica and partially inspired by Jamaican rock hall music, Rocksteady had 2 Grammy-winning singles, Hey Baby and Underneath It All. Both singles managed to reach the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and proved that No Doubt was still very much ska. Kind of. Put a big asterisk there, because this album is an interesting mix, with about half the songs being pop and the other half being reggae and ska. Only like 2 songs have trumpets in them. You can kind of see how they were drifting away from ska and becoming more pop. After Rocksteady, the band took a hiatus, and everyone just kind of did their own thing. Gwen Stefani went on to launch her own clothing line and even released her own solo album, Love Angel Music Baby. Tom Dumont released his own solo music project, Invincible Overlord, and Adrian Young, the band's drummer, did the drums for Bow Wow Wow during their 2004 tour. Tony Cannell even collaborated with Pink on her album Funhouse, co-producing several songs and doing backup vocals for Crystal Ball. Fast forward to September 2012, almost 11 years after the hiatus began, No Doubt released their final album, Push and Shove, with their single Settle Down peaking at number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100 and the album peaking at number 3. I wasn't a huge fan of Push and Shove, it's just kind of whatever, and had very little ska sound, more blatantly pop, which is probably why it charted so high, or it at least helped it. Who knows, maybe the real ska was the friends we made along the way. Since 2013, No Doubt has been on a hiatus again, and so far, it doesn't look like they're coming back. No Doubt has had a few reunion shows here and there, and most recently announced a Gwen Stefani solo concert to raise funds for charity. Will No Doubt ever come back for real? I can't give an answer on that, but what I can give you is my V-card! That's right guys, I'm at a card game! Collect your favorite VTubers V-cards! That sounded much better in my head, to be honest. Link is in the description below.